Oh, it smells like victory. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Clint McLean. And this week we are headed to the TD Garden Arena for UFC Boston, UFC Savage for all I care. And this fight night will not be on a Saturday. First off, let me start with that big PSA. These fights are on Friday, October 18th. It's a bit of an odd situation, kind of throws my weekend off a little bit. I'm so accustomed to have my college football to kick my Saturday off, nice and chilled, relax, play with the daughter a little bit, and then move on to the UFC as it rolls on, do some family dinner, stuff like that with the fights in the background. It's going to be really weird getting off work and hustling home to turn those fights on and see what happens right away, and then not knowing what to do with myself on a Saturday night. Let's start this episode off right. We are coming off of a big win, and some people need to be shouted out. First and foremost, my main man, Baseball Bob, sent me a big fat juicy tip from us cashing all those bets last week, so thank you, Bob. Tips are always appreciated. They help keep this train rolling. Let's shout out a couple of new subscribers here. We've got Eski J Swall. We've got okay. Syf Grateful Dead. It's SYF Gray GR8 FULDED, and I'm staring at this thing like, what the hell is that? Grateful Dead. Got it. All right. We've got a new subscriber, Erroneous. I love it. We also have Dister of Souls and my man James Tran. Welcome to the Die Hard MMA podcast. Thank you everybody for subscribing. We're trying to get those sub numbers up. I want to break 1,000 by the end of 2019. I know it's a lofty goal, but we are gonna get there. Let's dive straight back into the recap of last week's event. We crushed it. We absolutely crushed it for UFC Fight Night 161. I mean, it was just a great night. It's one of those ones that even the spots where I passed on, those leans cash. So I wish I had just gone total madman and rapid fired on everything, because we would have hit everything. It was pretty great. So our first bet of the night, we had Marlon Chito Vera inside the distance at plus 125. The man is a beast. He's an absolute monster. He got it done in the third round. It was one of those late finishes where I'm sitting there kind of shaking my head like, damn it, we're going to start the night off with another loss on the first pick. I hate that. It's bad karma. I like to start off with a win, and then out of nowhere he feels his opponent weakening and just cranks it up to 10. Oh, Marlon Vera, I love you. That's why we love you. Thank you so much for cashing that plus 125. We had Alex Morono at plus 131, and I know a lot of people were crying robbery on the decision with Max Payne Griffin, but I honestly had it 2-1 for my boy Morono, and that is why, ladies and gentlemen, you bet the dog. That's something we talk about on this podcast all the time. If it's going to be a close, hairy type of fight, and you know it's going to come down to a potential split decision, take the extra money. Instead of sitting there sweating your balls off laying minus 160 on a guy who is inconsistent, bet the guy who's a beast and will not stop moving forward at plus 131. Now, I do feel like Max Payne Griffin showed some advances. He actually locked up that third round really, really well, and it had me sweating at the end there because he landed like 6 takedowns in the third round. But I thought Morono got it done. He had enough to get it done. So here's where everything kind of went off the rails a little bit. Devin Brown, Bear Clark. This is where, you know what, I want to give ourselves a little bit of props. We did the right thing by taking the man by decision, because he was not going to win by knockout. He was not going to win by submission. So we are essentially playing this guy straight at plus 220. Now, it's one of those spots where in hindsight, I'm going, son of a bitch. Ryan Spann has got crazy knockout power. I thought Devin Clark was going to wrestle more. This is where I can't make the guy follow my game plan. You know, maybe he tried and he felt the power and the strength of a guy like Ryan Spann, who's just huge for the division, and thought, nope, that's not going to work. Maybe that's why it happened. But either way, we dropped a unit there. It's okay. No big deal. We stole one back on the next fight. Eric, ya boy Anders. I am taking a break from betting him. Just so you all know, moving forward, we're going to look long and hard at any Eric Anders' potential bet because he did not look impressive. So I broke this down in last week's podcast. He's not evolving. I mean, not even a little. He's not changing his style. He's not updating anything. He's the exact same fighter. And that's concerning because he's supposed to be young. He's supposed to be athletic. He's supposed to be the kind of guy that can make these leaps and bounds, but he doesn't. So he's going to have a very specific set of fighters that he can win against. And that's what I thought we had this week, but GM3 gave him a run for his money. That fight was so close, and I feel so lucky to have won that because it very easily could have gone the other way. That's one where if you took the dog on GM3, I feel like you probably had the right side there. Eric Anders should have won that fight much more comfortably based on how I played it out in my head. But you know what? I'll take it. We had a judge's decision go our way there, so we may have caught a little bit of good variance. Marvin Vettori and Davison Figueiredo, the parlay. Oh, I wish I had made this a 2-unit parlay. I was close ever since starting off super hot on the 2-unit plays going 4-0. I've been on a downslide. I've lost 4 in a row. So we're now 4-4 on the 2-unit parlays. And I thought, you know what? Or I'm sorry, not parlays, 2-unit plays. So I'm like, let's take a break. Let's just take a break from the 2-unit plays. The reason I do 1-unit plays in the first place is exactly this. It doesn't matter how confident you are on a pick, you can still be wrong in MMA. And that's why we bet big, juicy, fat underdogs all the time. These big favorites get upset. And we had that happen to us for 4 picks in a row where we had big favorites that we were very confident on that got knocked down. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to make this a 1-unit parlay. I love it. We're getting even money. I think it's perfect. And I want to make it a 2-unit, but you know what? Let's not sell another unit down the river. Well, it went exactly like I thought it would. So we would have locked up an extra unit there, but whatever. I'm going to stop bitching. Marvin Vettori, masterful performance over 3 rounds, did exactly what I said he was going to. Just a bad matchup for Sanchez, which we all knew, which Sanchez knew, which is why he ducked the fight so many times. Davison Figueiredo got it done not in the way that I anticipated. I thought he was going to be the better, more explosive fighter, and I thought he might even TKO, what's-his-face, Mullet Man, and he submitted him. I mean, that's not the way I saw the fight going at all in my head, but he got it done, and he got it done quick. Last pick of the night, Michelle Waterson. I'm a little frustrated with myself on this one. I mean, just a little, because in MMA, it's hard not to be able to justify a plus 300. If you can find even just a little bit of justification on why you're taking a plus 300, it's just not that bad. Because like I always say, fights are way closer than these lines suggest once you lock 2 human beings inside of a cage. But the fact remains that Michelle Waterson is just too small, especially against someone like Joanna. And Joanna put on a masterful performance. My whole big justification was that I thought Joanna was checked out. I really thought that she was not going to be able to return to form, and I didn't think she was going to be as dangerous as she used to be, and that would open the window for Michelle Waterson. And I was wrong. I got to apologize to Joanna. JJ, my lady, I'm sorry. She came out and she was firing on all cylinders, looked just as dominant as she ever did, and you know, props to you guys who parlayed her because she looked like an absolute runaway freight train. There were 2 spots where Michelle got her back, and I was screaming my face off because Michelle's got some good jiu-jitsu. And I was like, come on, choke her out for me. Pull a Misha Tate here. Get that choke. Get that belt. It would have been kind of a fluky way to get it done, but I would have taken that 3-1 on my bet for sure. So, bad end to the night, and we really could have passed on the main event. I tweeted out that pick after the whole weigh-ins controversy and Joanna saying that she wasn't going to make weight and all that stuff, and that really is what sent me over the edge to make that bet. So, a little upsetting that happened because we could have gone on our merry way without it if I hadn't gotten a little trigger happy once that weigh-in information happened. So, all in all, fantastic night. We go 5-2. And that brings us to, let me see where we're sitting right now. Actually, I forgot to tally that up right before the show. So you're going to get the report live here. Plus 2.56 units on the night. And damn, that feels good. That feels so freaking good. I love it when those units go up after the struggles that we've been having at this last couple of months. it's been pretty fantastic to get back on track and move this thing the right direction. We're now sitting at 120 to 110 win-loss ratio for plus 23.93 units on the podcast since January, and we are still trying to get to that 50 unit mark before the end of the year. It's possible. We can do it. And the first step to doing it is digging right on in to Friday's fights at the TD Garden. Let's go. But real quick before we get started on the breakdowns, I want to say thank you to everybody who tips and donates to the show. Seriously, I'm a one-man army over here. I do a shit ton of research to bring all you guys some entertainment and a fun show, and then some really good information, as well as winning bets. Everybody that's been with me since the beginning is up a decent chunk of cash. Tips and donations, like I said, keep this train rolling. So thank you all for that. I've got some big ideas. I've got some big directions that I want to take the podcast in, and your help makes that happen. If you want to tip because you cashed in some serious money on your weekend in Vegas based on my picks and information, or if you just enjoy the show and like what I'm doing, send a donation my way. On PayPal, I am at maximusin3d@gmail.com. My Venmo is diehard MMA pod. Both of those will be in the description below. Feel free to hit me up. Again, always appreciated, never expected, but thank you all that do, because it actually makes a pretty huge difference for me, so thank you. So kicking off the night, we start the evening at heavyweight. Daniel Spitz is taking on Tanner Boser. Daniel Spitz is 6-2-0, making his UFC debut. Tanner Boser is 16-5-1 and will also be making his UFC debut. Now, you may recognize Tanner Boser's name, and that's because he was set to make his UFC debut a couple months ago, and we actually had a pick against him in that fight because his opponent, Lemos, was an absolute juice monkey. Roided out of his mind, dear God. And we were going to bet on him because I just didn't think Tanner was going to be able to stop this dude when he was so full of the sauce. It was ridiculous. But he got popped. He got caught. The fight got canceled, so the bet pushed, which was unfortunate because I really think we were going to win that one. The dude was an absolute mountain of a man. It was redonkulous. So he's getting a much more even and fair matchup here. His opponent, Daniel Spitz, the biggest thing that I noticed about him is that he really, really slows down. He's a tall, long heavyweight. He is 6'7", and Tanner is 6'2", so he's going to have a huge height and reach advantage here in this spot, but he really tends to slow down after the first round. He looks not so bad in the first. He uses kicks. He moves around okay, but then he just kind of starts plodding, and as soon as the bell dings for round 2, he's about half pace from that. Pace, I can't talk tonight. Half speed. Tanner Boser on the flip side of this thing, he's not an overly active fighter himself. Both of these guys are kind of slow, kind of plodding. Tanner Boser is more technical in my opinion, and one of the things I like to see in this fight is that Boser actually has a history of TKOs via leg kick. He likes to eat his opponent's legs up. He's going to be the much shorter man here. Daniel Spitz is going to have those long legs that are going to be right in range for him, and I really think that Tanner Boser is going to be able to live up to his name, the Bulldozer, and just kind of walk this guy down and chip him apart. Daniel Spitz, you know what? I lied when I said he was making his UFC debut. He's not making his UFC debut. He's had 3 UFC fights. He's just very, very forgettable. And I did fight tape research before I started this podcast. So if that tells you anything, I completely forgot about his fights and his record. So he lost a decision in his UFC debut to Mark Godbeer. Really uninspiring fight. And then he gets a TKO win over Anthony Hamilton. That fight took all of 24 seconds. So not a whole lot to learn from that. He gets roughed up by Walt Harris for 2 full rounds, and right before the bell at the end of round 2, he gets crashed and dropped. And I mean, it looked like he was going to go to defend himself, but the ref waved it off. I don't think it was a bad stoppage because he was slowing down big time, and Harris was starting to open up, and we know what kind of an athlete Walt Harris is. Now, it seems like the guys that are going to be more athletic really give Spitz a problem, but that's not Tanner Boser. Tanner Boser is going to stand in front of him and play that slow plodding game. So if Tanner Boser doesn't TKO leg kick this guy like I think he has the capability of doing so, this might be a very, very slow, boring fight where they kind of stare at each other and pick and poke at each other throughout the battle. It's a really close line here. We've got Tanner Boser at -140, -135, and the flip on that is Daniel Spitz at +115 to +125-ish. So you can get them kind of in that range, and I think that's about appropriate. If I have to make a pick here, I'm going to go with Tanner Boser. I'm not going to make an official pick as far as bets for the podcast goes. Again, I would take Boser. I think he gets it done via leg kicks, or he just wins a 3-round decision because he's going to be the more active fighter in rounds 2 and 3 more than likely. But realistically, both of these guys are untested. We know that Daniel Spitz is a relatively low level, but checking out his Instagram and stuff, he does look like he's coming in decent shape for this. He knows he's got a fight on his hands that he needs to win. Going 1-2 in the UFC in your first 3 is not great. And then when they toss you to a debuting fighter, you know you're on the chopping block if you don't get something done. So he's coming in hard. I think it's probably going to be really close. I wouldn't hate if you looked at maybe betting an over on this one, but these are heavyweights, so both these dudes could put somebody out at basically any point in time. Like I said, complete pass. The next fight is a middleweight tilt between Kevin Holland, 15-4-0, and he is taking on an UFC newcomer and Dana White's Contender Series veteran, Brendan Allen. Brendan is 12-3 to Kevin Holland's 15-4. And this is another one. You know what? Actually, let me just go ahead and give you a disclaimer here. I know last week I said that we were going to be real careful. We were going to play it close to the vest and not make a whole ton of picks. And then we rapid fired all the way down the card. This is not going to be one of those weeks. This is a very, very strange week. This card is really top heavy in my opinion. The main card is absolutely freaking awesome. The undercard has a lot of debuting fighters, and from a MMA fan perspective, you know I love those kinds of fights. It really gives us an idea of what these young and up-and-coming fighters are really going to be able to do in the UFC. There's lots of knowledge to be learned at this kind of a fight card, but I'm not comfortable putting money on a lot of them because they are so unproven unless I really see something that jumps out at me. So we're going to have more than likely a lot of passes, especially on the undercard for this fight, and this is going to be one of them. Just going to give you a heads up. Brendan Allen is a submission fighter, all right? He's got a 58% finish rate via submission. 7 of his 12 wins have come by submission. He won via submission rear naked choke in the first round on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series Season 3, actually. And he looks pretty damn good. I mean, the kid's got a good solid record. He's fought some okay opponents. He's finishing regional scene fighters, which is exactly what you want to see. But this is a big step up in competition for him. He's diving into the UFC's middleweight division, which is a hard-hitting big division, and he's taking on Kevin Holland, who also came off of the Contender Series Season 2. He dove into the UFC head first and fought Thiago Santos in his very first fight. That was absolutely insane. You shouldn't do that. Don't do that. Since that loss, Kevin Holland has rattled off 3 straight wins, one of those by submission. The thing that I do not like about Kevin Holland is how unpredictable he is. We talk all the time about not wanting to bet on fighters because of, fight IQ issues and things like that. I don't know that Kevin Holland necessarily has a fight IQ problem. He just is kind of, he's wild and unpredictable. And I mean, it works for him, but his last 2 fights over Gerald Meerschaert and Alessio Di Chirico, they were both very, very close, very contested decisions because he just kind of fights to his opponent's level. So that's not really somebody that I want to put my money on until he shows me that he will follow a game plan start to finish and be able to murder the guys that he is supposed to in the cage. I think that Kevin Holland is going to have a physical advantage in this fight, and he tends to grapple with his opponents when they're willing to engage him. He's only got a 1-inch height advantage, but I think he's going to be the stronger, more physically explosive kind of guy. He tends to have kind of wild and flashy strikes because he doesn't care if it lands on the mat, and then they can grapple and kind of just, I mean, I'm a grappler. I love jiu-jitsu. I don't want to say roll all over because that's really painting a bad picture of what you do on the ground in MMA, but that's really what Kevin Holland does. He's wild and crazy, and he looks to catch people in things. He doesn't mind giving up bad positions to try to go for a submission that's a really low percentage submission. I'm a fan of watching Kevin Holland. I'm not a fan of betting on Kevin Holland. If you really want my opinion, I think that he wins this fight, However, I think it'll probably be another very close decision where the only reason he wins that fight is because he stood out more than his opponent did. So we have an opening line, Kevin Holland minus 150. 55% of the money has come in on Kevin Holland, and he is now minus 160 or minus 165. I think that that's the correct idea, that he is the fighter that's going to win this thing, but I would never lay that kind of wood on him. I mean, I know minus 160, minus 150, that's not that big of a line, but he fights so damn close with his opponents, and I can't really bet against him either, against a debuting fighter who's going to step straight into his wheelhouse. This is a complete pass. We're moving down one weight class to welterweight, 170 pounds, where Sean Brady is taking on Court McGee. Now, Sean Brady is another debuting fighter. He is 10-0, and he's relatively impressive in my opinion. He is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. However, he's got 5 decisions of his 10 wins on his record. So when you see people coming up in the regional scene, you really want to see them kind of smashing their competition, and so far he hasn't done that. Now, a lot of times what we'll see is these guys will be crushers on the regional scene, and then they'll step up into the UFC and they'll start winning by decision until they get their feet wet, and then they'll pick back up with the finishes. Sean Brady has been kind of spotty. He's had a whole lot of decisions in his regional career, so I'm not sure that he's going to step in here and be all that dangerous. Now, that's just kind of a speculation based on history, really. I mean, things that I've seen over the course of MMA, but Sean Brady has fought a good level of competition. So I'm not saying he's bad. You know, maybe he just had some really tough guys that he fought for those decisions, and that's what happened here. But he is in for a tall order if he's going the grinding route, because he is up against Court the Crusher McGee, who is just the absolute pinnacle of a grinding fighter. This man's cardio is his biggest asset. All he does is grind. He's basically a semi-threat everywhere, and he will just lock your game down. He's got knockout power, he's got submission offense, and he just will work you over the course of 15 minutes and win a decision. That's really all he does. So I don't know how much I like Sean Brady stepping in against a guy like Court McGee. Now, Court has had it a bit rough. He is 2-3 in his last 5, and his only wins came over Dominick Steele and Alex Garcia. However, he has lost to guys like Douglas Lima, Sean Strickland, Ben Saunders. That one's definitely a little bit concerning because you shouldn't be losing to Ben Saunders, and even his wins aren't overly impressive, but the split decision loss to Diego Lima, in my mind, that was a good fight. We were on Diego Lima for that fight. We knew he would show up there, but that was a really good showing from both men, in my opinion. This is a tall order from Tom Brady, and I really feel like this line is just a little bit wide. Sean Brady opened up at minus 250. He's been bet down to about minus 240, minus 225 in spots. Court McGee was about plus 190. You can get him at plus 205 over at Pinnacle, but everybody else has him down around plus 185, plus 180. So the market is really confused on who should be the favorite in this fight. And I kind of love it when that happens, because you never know what's going to happen in that kind of a fight when the smart guys can't make up where they want to put their money. So honestly, I think this is dog or pass. I think Court McGee has a ton of value at plus 205. I'm liking it a lot less around plus 180. But if you can get him up around plus 200, if he gets any higher than that, I might have to take the stab on Court McGee, simply because I like fading guys in step-up spots. Court McGee is older in this position. He's going to be 34 years old versus Sean Brady's 26. You get a young kid like that. He finally made it to the UFC. He steps under the big lights for the first time. His mom's in the crowd. His girlfriend is waiting for him and waves at him as he steps into the cage. You've got those butterflies in your stomach, and then you have that all-important adrenaline dump. And if you have an adrenaline dump and you wear out in this fight against a guy like Court McGee, he will crush you like a kid in high school smashes a Pepsi can on their forehead. That's what he does. So I think there's a little bit of value on Court McGee. I'm not sure I'll take that shot yet, especially with the way this fight is set up. Some more money might come in on Sean Brady. If Court McGee gets up to like a plus 250 spot, it might be a must bet type of situation. So we will see what happens. Keep an eye on Twitter, but at this point, I'm going to take the high road and pass. The next fight is Boston Boom Boom Salmon taking on Randy Costa. Now, Randy Costa is coming off of a UFC debut submission loss to our guy and IQ trash can Brandon Davis. He is 4-1 taking on Boston Boom Boom Salmon, and Boston is the poor recipient of a first round encounter with Khalid Taha. So the first thing that jumped out to me when I started tape studying for these two fights is Randy Costa is huge for 135. He's 5'10", and surprisingly, he's only going to have a 1-inch advantage on Boom Boom Salmon, who is 5'9". These are some big 135ers. Now, Randy Costa, in his UFC debut, the very first thing he did when he fought Brandon Davis was rock the crap out of him. He stepped into the center of the octagon and threw a punch that dropped Brandon Davis. He was not ready to start that fast. And before getting his UFC debut, Randy Costa had roughly 2 minutes of fight time. 4 first-round KOs. Not a single fight got to the second minute. So he came out looking to do that again to Brandon Davis. And now we know the kind of chin that Davis has. He's a complete zombie. Randy Costa trains out of Lauzon MMA, so he's going to be training with his coach. His boy, Joe Lauzon, is fighting later on in the card, and you all know I love when fighters do that. They peak at the same time. They are ready to go at the same time as their teammates, and I think it's a huge advantage. Now, Boston Salmon, on the flip side of this thing, he looked impressive prior to coming to the UFC as well. Not to mention he's got more experience. He has a 3-fight amateur record, all 3 wins, 2 of them coming by KO. And then his pro record is 4 KOs of his 6 wins. The dude is a knockout artist himself. He's only gone to decision 3 times, one of which he lost, and then his lone loss by KO was a first round one itself earlier this year. So one thing that I talked about in last week's fights is the brain damage that comes with getting knocked out very recently. He was knocked out in April. Now, that was a decent chunk of time ago. He took about 6 months off. That's relatively appropriate, but you never know if these guys are going to be rattled after that. And he's taking on a serious power puncher in Randy Costa, who's also got some very, very long limbs and knows how to use them. This is a live and die by the shield type of fighter in Randy Costa, in my opinion. I don't want to pick a side in this fight. However, I do think I found a way for us to play it. We have 5 dimes that I am in love with right now because they're releasing totals early enough for the freaking podcast, which makes a massive difference for me making picks. I can never do totals on the show because nobody has them out, and thank you 5 dimes for getting them out in time. Randy Costa versus Boston Salmon right now is lined at 2.5. I think the under 2.5 at even money is the way to go. We don't even have to pay wood for this thing going under 2.5. I don't see how this fight gets out of the second round. These guys are going to both be looking to erase the first round losses, and the way that both of them fight really lends itself to a finish. We're not sure who, if either of these guys is UFC caliber, although my suspicion is that Randy Costa is the better of the two. The way he fought with a very, very skilled fighter like Brandon Davis actually gives me really high hopes for this kid, and I will risk 1 unit to win one that somebody is going to go out on their shield before that 2.5 round mark. So let's do it, under 2.5. Next up, we're hanging around the little guys. We've got Kyle Crash Bochniak taking on Sean Woodson at 145 pounds, the featherweight division. Sean the Warrior Woodson is making his UFC debut. He also comes to us from Dana White's Contender Series. I'm starting to notice a pattern here on this undercard. I told y'all there's going to just be a lot of these kinds of fights. Now, he is an impressive 6-0 stepping into the UFC for the first time, coming off the Contender Series with a highly impressive flying knee knockout of Terrence McKinney. So he is riding high coming into this thing. Kyle Bochniak, on the other side of this, is having a rough go of it. He dropped his UFC debut back in 2016, bounced back with a split decision win over Enrique Barzola, who I am high on, so that's actually a pretty good win in hindsight. But then he dropped the ball against Jeremy Kennedy, he beat Brandon Davis, and has lost back-to-back fights against Zabit Magomed Sharipov and Hakeem Dawodu. Now, Hakeem Dawodu and Zabit are both very, very good names, and he lost to Hakeem via split decision. Kyle Bochniak is a much better fighter than his record would suggest. He's 8-4, and those 4 losses have all been tough, grindy decision losses. And even, like I said, that last one against Hakeem was very, very close. So this is another one that I've got a real tough time with. It's a close line. Kyle Bochniak opened up -135, and he sits at about -140 right now, -145. Sean Woodson is about a +115 underdog. I think that's appropriate. Sean Woodson is making his UFC debut. He's flashy. He's what the UFC wants. He's riding high off of a knockout. Kyle Bochniak is in a must-win situation, and I think he's got the skills to do so, though I'm not entirely convinced. It's gonna be rough. I think he's gonna be able to pull the older statesman and grind on the new kid who's 27-year-old trying to come in here and take what he's got. Kyle Bochniak is fighting for his job, and I expect him to show up because of that. But I don't have any reason to put any money on anybody. This is a dangerous fight, high variance, and I don't see a point in taking a side here. I actually don't like the line on the over-under either. It is set at 2.5. I would be willing to bet that this thing goes to a decision, but it's juiced to the over. We've got a +180 on the under, -240 on the over, and that seems about appropriate to me. Since these lines all seem pretty accurate on this fight, we don't need to bet it. This is another good one. Let's just log some information, watch this fight, sit back, be entertained, hope somebody gets knocked out, and sit tight with our money in our pockets for the next one. The next fight takes us to the women's division, where Meatball Molly McCann, who is 9-2, takes on the UFC debutante Diana the Warrior Princess Belbita. Now, this is a fight that I want less than no part of. I want to be nowhere near this thing. The cat is out of the bag. Meatball Molly is way better than anyone gave her credit for. She opened up at -335 and has been steamed all the way up to -530. Holy crap, she is a -530 favorite, and it's justified. She's a very, very good fighter. She's in the UFC. Her only loss comes by submission to Gillian Robertson in her UFC debut, and her opponent in Belbita is just not that great. She's got a long history of submission losses. She's been subbed out 3 times, and even though she's going to have a height and reach advantage in this fight, I don't know that she's going to know how to use it properly. I don't know that it will make that big of a difference. That all being said, you don't lay -500 on anybody, especially mid-tier women fighters. I do think Molly McCann is the right side of this thing. We're never, ever touching her at -500. Holy cow. Now, if you think that Molly McCann is going to be good enough to put her opponent away, you could get McCann inside the distance at +210. I don't think that's such a bad option considering how easily her opponent has been submitted in the past, but I also am not going to lay money on that because I'm not sure that that's Meatball's style. She likes to go to decision. She goes to decision more often than not in her fights, and the only submission recently was the one that she lost to with Gillian Robertson. So, yeah, not touching this one. Let's move on. All right, we're finally getting to the good stuff. The main event of the preliminary card in maybe record time for the way my podcasts have been going. We're going to get Manny the Bermudez Triangle. Bermudez taking on Charles Rosa Boston Strong, which good name there, especially fighting in Boston here. This is going to be a very, very interesting fight in my opinion. Manny Bermudez is streaking. The dude is a sick ground fighter. He is 14-1. 11 of those 14 wins have come by submission for a 79% finish rate. I am highly impressed with Manny Bermudez. He lost his last fight earlier this year against Casey Kenny. Why did I add D's in that thing? Jeez. Casey Kenny, who's 13-1 himself. And jeez, that was a good fight. Sorry, I'm kind of geeking out over here on that fight. Good fight, like both of these guys. Very, very bet on, in my opinion. Now, Charles Rosa Boston Strong has been sidelined since 2017. His last fight in the UFC was April 8th of 2017 when he got KO'd in the 3rd round by Shane freaking Burgos. Now, Shane Burgos is another rising star who we have very, very high hopes for, so there's nothing wrong with that loss. Before that, he beat Kyle Bochniak, which We talked about Kyle Bochniak not being so bad. He lost a split decision to Yair Rodríguez in 2015. This kid is not bad. I mean, you look at those last 3 fights and a split loss to Yair, a win over Bochniak, and then a loss by KO to Burgos after a 3-round battle. That's not so bad. The issue is it happened 2 years ago. He hasn't been seen since then because he's had so many injury problems. He hasn't been able to get his way to the cage. Now, he trains out of American Top Team, which is a fantastic team. I love American Top Team. But I don't know what this kid's got left. I mean, he's 33 years old and he's trying to make a resurgence in MMA. And if you follow him on Instagram, he's got a lot of posts on there about positivity. He looks like he's in pretty damn good shape. He looks like he's been back training for quite some time with all the who's who of ATT. So, unfortunately, I don't think I can pull the trigger on this one. I like Manny Bermudez, and I would like to bet Manny Bermudez. If money keeps coming in on Rosa, I will bet Manny Bermudez. Let me just tell you that. So the line opened up, Manny Bermudez a minus 170 favorite. Most of the money has come in on Rosa, and Bermudez can now be had at about minus 140, minus 145. If he gets down to a pick'em area, I'll play Manny Bermudez. But it's kind of a dice roll. It's not really a strong spot because we don't know what we're getting in Charles Rosa in that amount of time. Even though he hasn't been able to go hard, he could have made leaps and bounds improvements in the gym, and we just don't know because there's no video of it. There's no current fight footage of him. We have no idea what he's bringing to the table. On the flip side of that, he could be broken. He could be absolutely done and just be getting that one more fight because you know what? It's in his backyard. It's a giant stadium in Boston. It's his chance to fight in front of his fans and his family and his friends. And how do you pass that up when you're a UFC fighter and you're still on contract? I don't think you can. So I don't know if this guy is limping to the cage or if he is storming to the cage. And because of that, we're going to have to lay off. Now, we could take Manny Bermudez inside the distance at plus 130, kind of like we did with Marlon Chito Vera, and just hope that he gets the finish because more than likely, if he's going to win, that's probably the way that it's going to come. Manny Bermudez is an absolutely filthy submission practitioner. I mean, if he's going to get the win, I expect him to get the choke. But I don't think plus 130 is juicy enough to do that. I liked taking the inside the distance on Vera because he could finish both with strikes and by submission. I think Bermudez is kind of submission or bust, so maybe wait for that sub prop to come out. And like I said, we'll keep an eye on this one closely as the line moves, as it gets a little closer to fight time. That being said, if you want to get my plays that come later on, you got to be following me on Twitter at DieHardMMAPod. Jump on Twitter. Get over there, follow me. That's when I tweet out my plays that come later in the week after the show's recordings. Give me a follow. All right, we made it to the main card, ladies and gentlemen. This is where we kick the show into overdrive. I love this main card. This main card is absolutely stacked with some serious talent on it, and I do have a lot to say about it. Our very first fight comes in the middleweight division, 185 pounds, where Darren the Dentist Stewart takes on Darren Winn. And Darren Winn, if you all recall, is miniature Daniel Cormier. Dude is short at 5'7" for the division, but very, very broad. He's built exactly like DC, and he's a 3-time All-American wrestler. He's small for the division, like I said. He's got really fast hands. He likes to throw these big looping hooks that have some serious power on him. He also throws a nice solid overhand. However, he does seem to struggle in the clinch, considering he's pretty small for the division. His opponents have a pretty easy time grabbing him around the head and neck and then pounding him with knees. He had a really hard time in his last fight against Eric Spicely. Now, his UFC debut came against UFC dropout Eric Spicely. Now, I don't mean that, I'm not trying to be degradatory there. Eric Spicely is a good fighter. He's got some serious skills. He did get knocked out of the UFC after going on a 3-fight losing streak. He put together 2 big finish wins in the first round outside the UFC and then got brought back on short notice to take on Darren Winn. Unfortunately, Darren Winn was too much for him. Spicely's not great. I'm sorry. I was trying to be nice. He's not fantastic. He's probably bottom tier UFC, if UFC caliber at all. So good, solid test for Darren Winn's UFC debut. However, Not fantastic. Now, I was super high on Darren Winn in that fight. I thought he was going to absolutely roll through Eric Spicely, and he set an absolute record for output against Eric Spicely, and Spicely didn't go down. And Spicely has 2 KO losses on his record. 2 of those came in the UFC, one of them from Darren Stewart. So I expected that if those 2 guys were able to knock him out, that Darren Winn would be able to as well, and he didn't. So I don't know if maybe Darren Winn's knockout power is not quite what I thought it was, or if that was a case of, nerves, jitters, adrenaline dump, that kind of a situation that led to him not being able to do it, but he landed clean and he landed a lot. So if you were going to knock him out, you'd think you would have got there. I have suspicions about Darren Winn's power in the UFC at this point. He also got rocked a bunch of times with the knees that he was getting hit with by Eric Spicely in the clinch. It was a much better fight than it should have been, in my opinion, and we had a bet on Darren Winn for that one. Let's flip sides here. We're going to talk about Darren the Dentist Stewart. This is a guy who I had some serious hype on when I first laid eyes on him. However, he started his UFC career on a 3-fight skid. He got submitted twice, and basically people were just looking to grind this dude out because he's the dentist, because he knocks people's teeth out. His power is unreal. He throws serious heavies. And one of the things I like to see is his game is evolving. Since he figured out people are going to try and take him down because they're scared to stand with him, he's really worked on improving his takedown defense. His last fight against Bevan Lewis, he dropped Bevan Lewis right out the gate with 2 big, heavy leg kicks, and that was something I didn't expect to see from him. So the fact that he's widening his range and he's got that power in his legs as well as his hands is a serious good sign to me. Now, like I said, people try to take this guy down because they just don't want to stand with him. He's given up 8 takedowns in his last 4 fights, and that's a bad stat. However, every single one of those takedowns came from Edmund Shabazian, and he still only lost a split decision in that fight. Now, don't get me wrong, Darren Winn is an all-American wrestler. He could come in here and make this a grindy type of wrestling match, but I'm going to go ahead and take the shot that Darren the Dentist Stewart is going to be able to take this dude on. Darren Winn is 6-0, and like I said, still very, very green, still very, very untested. I was not overly impressed with him when he fought Eric Spicely. And I think if he's going to have any kind of a stand-up battle, if Darren Stewart is going to be able to keep this fight up on the feet at all, which I think he will have his moments, I think he can knock Darren Winn out. I know Darren Winn is kind of a little tank, but I think this might be a little too much, a little too soon. I'm going to play Darren Stewart at -106. I did tweet that line out a little bit earlier because I wasn't sure which direction this thing was going to go, but it looks like money's starting to come in on Darren Winn. So you're going to get a better line than me. You're going to get +110, +105, even money. So just kind of look around. If you want to tail me on that one, take that poke. Now, like I said, this one's a bit of a gamble because Darren Winn is such a good wrestler, he could put Darren Stewart on his back. But I'm going to go ahead and bet on the power in this one, because I'm not sure that I'm sold on Darren Winn after that Eric Spicely fight. The next fight is maybe my favorite fight on the entire card. A women's flyweight tilt between Maycee Barber and Gillian Robertson. Maycee Barber is 21 years old, 7-0, taking on our girl Gillian, who's 24 and 7-3. Now, some of you who listened to the show for a while know I did an interview with Gillian Robertson after her last fight, and we just love the crap out of this girl. She is so freaking awesome. She is violence incarnate, and she's cute as a button. So, huge fan of Gillian. On top of that, she's severely underrated as a fighter, and the bookies just haven't caught up. That is clear cut in this fight. She opened up as a massive underdog and got steamed immediately. I snagged +140 on her. I think she opened up at +170, which is egregious and insulting. I tweeted out Gillian Robertson official pick at +140, and I hope you tailed it because that line is long gone. Gillian Robertson is now +110 or +115. You cannot get any better on her. She's even -105 in places. She dipped down to even money. So some money is coming back on Maycee Barber, it looks like, but I doubt we're going to get anywhere near that +140 line that we had to kick this thing off. Gillian Robertson trains out of American Top Team, and she is she's like the T2000, man. Like, she is absolutely a test vial for them. They're trying some new things with her, and it's working. She's in the lab basically every single day. When I did that interview with her, she has no care of anything outside of MMA. I tried to ask her about her personal life, tried to ask her about her hobbies, tried to talk to her about some of the things that she is interested in. All she cares about is pounding people's faces in and choking girls out. She just wants to fight. Now, her last 3 fights, she did get caught in a submission by Mayra Bruno Silva back in September of 2018. But since then, she has subbed out Veronica Macedo, and she TKO'd black belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu juice monkey Sarah Froda, who got popped for steroids. She choked out Molly McCann. She armbarred Emily Whitmire. She's also smart enough to know, in the podcast, she told me, she was like, look, something you've got to be aware of is that girls are flexible and they don't tap to arm bars. So if you hit an arm bar on them, you might not get the finish. We've seen that a lot lately in women's fights. And she's smart enough to know that you get the back and go for the choke because of that reason. She's very well aware of the fact that women don't tap to arm bars. So she is a thinker. She is so incredibly technically smart. I love it. Now, Maycee Barber is no joke. I know I'm playing up Gillian Robertson here because I'm a fan of her as a fighter. I'm a fan of her as a person. But we can't overlook Maycee Barber. She is 21 years old. She is 7-0, and she's won her last 4 by KO TKO. This fight is going to be an absolute war. Now, something I do want to point out, though, is that her last fight was against JJ Aldrich, and in the first round, she was not ready for the smoke that JJ Aldrich was bringing. She got rocked. She got hurt by JJ in the first round. And then she poured it on when they came out in round 2, and she hurt JJ with a shot that just kind of folded her, and it was the end from there. She got TKO'd. But what I'm saying is Maycee Barber is young, green, and she still has holes in her game. She's primarily a kicker, and that's going to cause a problem because Gillian Robertson is a ground fighter, and she wants this thing on the mat. If you throw a leg out there for her to snag, she's going to take it. And if Maycee Barber can't use her kicks, they're going to be in even closer, which means boxing range, which means clinching range, which means Gillian Robertson will have a chance to tie her up and either take her back or get her to the ground. I think Gillian wins this thing inside the distance, and I'm not saying that in any way biased. The line was off when it opened, so we smashed it at plus 140. If you want to get her at plus 110, plus 115, I straight up think that she wins this fight, so I think that that is an absolutely fine way to go. Gillian Robertson is female Nico Price. Only better. She wants to come out here and kill somebody. And if she's not going to kill them, she's willing to put herself into a bad position to get finished herself. I think this fight does not go the distance. And Gillian Robertson inside the distance right now is plus 235. So if you want to roll those dice on that option, I'd say go right ahead and hit that as well. You could also play the under 1.5 at plus 130. I don't know if that's... never mind. I take that back. Don't do that. It might end in the first round. My gut says that it ends in the first round, but I don't know that plus 130 on a women's fight is enough juice for us to go ahead and take that stab. I like Gillian Robertson here a lot. I'm playing her straight. I'm going to sprinkle her inside the distance. I don't know that I'm going to load up 2 units on her, but I'm very, very tempted to. I'm mostly just hoping that she crushes Maycee Barber, and then we get the follow-up interview afterward, because you damn well know that if Gillian Robertson wins this fight, I'm going to be tweeting her right away, asking her to come back on the podcast and give us an update. The next fight is in the lightweight division, where Joe J-Lo Lauzon makes his return to the octagon. Oh, let me just bask in this here for a second, because y'all got to know, Joe Lauzon was one of my very first ever favorite fighters in the UFC. He was coming off of The Ultimate Fighter and just getting his thing rolling when I first started tuning in. He's been in the UFC basically forever. He made his debut all the way back in 2007. Oh my gosh, feels like forever ago. And Joe Lauzon is a very, very special fighter. I mean, for me, I'm a complete geek. You all know that. I'm into the Avengers. I play video games, all kinds of stuff like that. But especially when I was younger, it was even worse. Well, Joe Lauzon is the type of geek who played video games and did jiu-jitsu. That's what he was all about. So I immediately connected with him. Now, he's a very, very, very high-level finisher. I mean, he's the number 6 UFC finisher, tied with 12 finishes. He's tied at number 2 for the most UFC bonuses with Nate Diaz. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's got his own school now. I mean, the dude is phenomenal. Now, it's no mistaking it that he's getting to the end of his career. He's 35 years old. He's 27-15. Tons of wear and tear on him. I mean, he's 1 in 4 in his last 5. He should be 0-5 in his last 5 if we're being honest, because he won a split decision against Marcin Held that was a complete robbery and should not have gone his way. In his last 2, he got KO'd by Clay Guida and Chris Grutzmacher. Things have not been looking good for J-Lo. This is his last fight. You absolutely know he's coming back in here to try to get one more win, not go out getting KO'd twice, and try and get one more win for the good old days. And the UFC is trying to take advantage of that. Jonathan Pearce is 7-3. He's riding a 3-fight win streak, and he just won via KO on Dana White's Contender Series. So they are looking to set this kid up by making a name off of beating Joe Lauzon. Now, Lauzon is 5'10 with a 71-inch reach versus Jonathan Pearce, who is 6 foot with a shared 71-inch reach. Now, J-Lo puts out 5.74 significant strikes per minute and absorbs 5.39 significant strikes per minute. He gets massively outstruck by his opponent. It's not a good thing. Now, even though it was only the Contender Series fight that we have stats on, Jonathan Pearce put out an incredible, staggering 12 significant strikes per minute. He is going to push the pace. He's going to push it hard. He's got good boxing. He's got heavy hands. He's tall and long, and he's got really good hips. However, he is a little sloppy in the striking. He does leave his chin open. J-Lo is a legit striker who's got he's got 8 knockouts on his record, 17 submissions, and a lot of those subs came after clipping somebody and rocking them. J-Lo's no joke. So this is a spot where it's another kind of dog or pass spot. I feel like the line is super close. They're giving J-Lo a ton of respect because I think they see kind of what I'm talking about with Jonathan Pearce. And he opened up at -120. He's been bet up to about -150. There is not enough juice on Joe Lauzon to make me pull that trigger. I want to pull the trigger on Joe Lauzon. My heart is with Joe Lauzon, and maybe that's a reason why I need to go ahead and pass here, is because I know I'm biased as hell. I want Joe Lauzon to win this fight so badly. Now, you can get him inside the distance at +235 if you want to take that stab on J-Lo. There's no way he grinds out a 3-round decision win over this kid. I just don't see that happening with how much damage he's taken over the course of his career, and then how good this kid is with his hands or how heavy he hits. I don't think J-Lo can stand up to that kind of abuse for long. Now, if you want to flip this thing, you can get Pearce inside the distance at +105, although that's not much different than just taking him on the money line when he's only sitting around -140, -150. So I don't have a spot that I like on this one. The over-under is set at 1.5, and again, I think that's fair because this could very easily be a 1-round fight. A lot of Joe Lauzon's fights don't go that far, and neither do the fights for Jonathan Pearce. It's really a crapshoot. I'm pulling for Joe Lauzon big time, but there is no safe way to bet this, and I wouldn't suggest that you bet it either. That brings us to the heavyweight division where the man, the myth, the legend himself, Greg, the Prince of War Hardy, returns to the cage. And y'all know how I am on Greg freaking Hardy. We faded him against Alan Crowder and cashed a big juicy line. We have attempted to fade him twice more since, and we've gotten crushed both times since he's won by KO in the first round. Greg Hardy is a former Carolina Panther, absolutely athletic freak. He made a good choice coming over to the UFC because he is bigger and stronger than basically everybody, and the UFC is spoon-feeding him so that he can get the experience he needs to evolve. They're handling their new star correctly. They're giving him Ben Sosoli in this case. Now, Ben is 7-2, who actually looks like a relatively legit fighter out of Australia. The thing I noticed about Ben, though, is that he puts his head down and he wings big punches. And when I mean he puts his head down, he really puts his head down. I mean, like, he leans forward and is staring at the canvas when he does this. He is primed for a knee or an uppercut knockout, and somebody like Greg Hardy is going to tee that up and tee that up quickly. You can't stand and bang with Greg Hardy. He's almost like Francis Ngannou. He's got this crazy crazy power that guys just can't seem to absorb. 1 or 2 shots, and that's all you need. Their eyes get wide, they stumble backward, the plan goes out the window, and they all dive on a leg. I expect the exact same thing to happen here. I don't know that there is any betting value in this kind of a spot. I don't like taking these big giant favorites. I did tweet out earlier that if you wanted Greg Hardy at minus 265, that you should bet it sooner than later because it's just going to go up. And I was right. Now he's sitting around minus 300, and I expect the closer we get to fight time, the more money is going to pour in on him because he is going to win this thing by first round KO. Now, if you can get a prop for him to win in the first round, you're probably only going to get about even money on it, and they might even charge you minus 110 on it because that's just what Greg Hardy does. His inside the distance line is minus 230. The books know what's up with this guy. The whole world knows the UFC is feeding this guy, and there is no way to bet him unless you want to parlay him up at a big fat favorite price. Now, I took Marvin Vettori last week at a minus 300 and parlayed him, so I guess I can't say this price is too big for me. I could parlay Greg Hardy, but there aren't any other giant favorites on the card that I like enough to parlay him, and I don't think I want to lay that kind of wood straight. I'm going to pass, and I'm going to sit back and laugh as he KOs flat another guy that shouldn't be in the cage with him. That brings us to the co-main event of the evening, where the rematch, kind of, Yair Rodríguez and Jeremy Stephens have reset their date from UFC Mexico. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one. To the newer fans of the show, new subscribers, I do apologize. This was a fight that was scheduled to be the main event of UFC Mexico just a couple weeks ago, and it ended in a very controversial eye poke situation where Jeremy Stephens was not able to continue. So I've broken this fight down a decent chunk in that previous episode. So go on back in the YouTube archives. It'll be there. You'll be able to listen to it there if you want the full thing. This fight changes drastically going from main event to co-main event, however. So a couple of things that are different. Yair Rodríguez, I questioned his chin. I questioned his durability with the way that he's been finished and the war that he was in against the Korean Zombie. Jeremy Stephens is probably the hardest hitter in the division, and I think that he has a good chance of knocking a guy like Yair Rodríguez out because he's not going to be intimidated and he won't let Yair Rodríguez stick and move him the way he likes to do. If he turns this into a brawl, Jeremy Stephens stands a good chance of landing a knockout. Now, Yair Rodríguez is a very talented 11-2 27-year-old. Jeremy Stephens is getting older at 33. He does seem to be reinvigorated. He lost a decision to Zabit Magomedsharipov earlier this year, and honestly, he looked pretty damn good in that fight. And before that, he did get TKO'd by Jose Aldo, which nobody saw coming, and he had a brutal 3-fight winning streak prior to that. So Jeremy Stephens really looks like he is on track and has found new life at this point in his career. Now, coming off of the eye poke situation, emotions are going to be high. Yair Rodríguez think that Jeremy Stephens kind of pussied out of the fight. He thought that he basically used the eye poke to get out of the situation. Jeremy Stephens could not open his eye. And then the crowd threw everything they had at him, quite literally, as they were trying to get him out of the cage. The Mexico fans were throwing beer cans and food and all kinds of shit at him as they were trying to get him out of the arena. It was despicable. As an MMA fan, it really upsets me that people would do that to a fighter, especially when we've seen guys like Bisping recently coming out on social media that he literally lost his eye to an eye poke. Eye pokes are no freaking joke in MMA. If Jeremy Stephens couldn't open his eye, he was not safe to fight, and he did the right thing by getting out of there. Now, I think Jeremy Stephens is also going to be heated in this fight, more so than last time, and he was really motivated for the last fight. He's going to be even more heated because of the things Yair Rodríguez has been saying, because of the accusations of him basically pansying out of the fight. Jeremy Stephens is ready to go, but the biggest difference is that this fight is going to be 3 rounds instead of 5. I liked our chances of getting a knockout with Jeremy Stephens over the course of 5 rounds. It was going to be a war. It was going to be longer. It was going to be a drag out type of fight. And because of that, I really liked Stephens' chances of clipping Yair at some point, maybe in the 4th round or the 5th round when Yair started to slow down. I actually think that this fight now favors Yair Rodríguez because it's going to be a 3-round fight. He is a tactical master. He's going to use that range. He's going to stick and move and run away, and his gas tank is going to last a whole lot better over 15 minutes than it would over 25 minutes. So I don't want to make the play on Jeremy Stephens at this point because I'm not sure he can get it done inside 3 rounds. Jeremy Stephens can win a decision, but he hasn't won a decision over a quality opponent in a long time. His most recent decision win was over Gil Melendez, who is completely shot. Before that, it was Renan Barão. Now, that was a prime Renan Barão, not prime, sorry. That was a better Renan Barão in 2016, but still not really a fantastic win over 3 rounds. Usually Jeremy Stephens loses decisions. I think this is KO or bust. So if you want to take the Jeremy Stephens prop by KO, I think that's kind of the way to go in this way. Stephens inside the distance is plus 245. You're getting a decent chunk of value. But Yair Rodríguez is not the kind of guy that I expect to go down within the 3-round limit. He did get pounded out by Frankie Edgar when Frankie big brothered him back in 2017. He was able to put him on his back, and Yair basically had no answer for it. Jeremy Stephens is a better wrestler than we give him credit for. He might be able to do the same thing, but I'm just not confident in it. I thought he was going to get a clean standing knockout when I did that breakdown. So really, this is another one of those fights that nothing is out of the question, and because it's a 3-rounder, I'm gonna have to take the pass. I don't really want to. I wish I could back Jeremy Stephens again in this spot because I was really actually pretty high on him the last time. I was pretty confident. But I just think the change and the biggest thing is it being 3 rounds. If it wasn't 3 rounds, I would take the shot on Jeremy Stephens again. With it being 3 rounds, I think that favors Yair enough to tilt me off of this thing. So unfortunately, it's a pass. Y'all know me. I might tweet out something later if I get a little bit itchy because I don't have that many plays on this card, and I might end up on Stephens again. That brings us to the main event of the evening. Chris, the All-American Weidman, is moving up from 185 to 205 pounds and takes on the undefeated Dominick, the Devastator Reyes. What a fight. Like I said, this main card is completely stacked. It's absolutely stacked. And this is such a fun fight. It's a complete changing of the guard spot, and I love it. Let's start with Dominick Reyes. Dude is a huge 205er. I mean, an absolutely massive 205er. He is 6'4" with a 77-inch reach. He's very, very aggressive. He attacks with big, heavy kicks. He likes to work the body, and he has got serious power. He's got good, solid takedown defense, and one of my favorite things is that he uses those Travis Brown-style elbows against the cage when people are trying to take him down. He's got good, strong hips, and he's able to keep his back up against the fence, which is really, really important in this fight when he's going up against a guy like Chris Weidman. Now, Chris Weidman is coming off of a year-long layoff, and he is 1-4 in his last 5. All 4 of those losses have come by KO. He's a Division I All-American wrestler and a good, solid Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Now, he pairs that with some actually really great striking. He's got good footwork and head movement. He throws short, fast combos, and he has a really good step-in elbow. If memory serves, he actually KO'd Mark Munoz with that all the way back in 2012. Now, one thing that I think bears noting here is that his most recent fight with Jacare Souza, he got hurt to the body a lot. Jacare Souza set up the headshots by working the body over and over and over again. And then he hit these really clean right overhands. And it just went right over Chris's guard. And it was almost like he was expecting a body shot to come, so he kept his hands lower. It was a perfect game plan by Jacare Souza. So Chris Weidman takes the belt from Anderson Silva and wins a 5-round decision over Lyoto Machida. He beats Vitor Belfort, and then he gets knocked out by Luke Rockhold. Luke Rockhold takes the belt, and Chris Weidman faces Yoel Romero. We know how that goes. Yoel, round 3, makes his UFC debut, crushes him in 24 seconds in the 3rd round. That's really, Yoel's MO. And then he fought Gegard Mousasi. That was a good, solid back-and-forth fight before he got TKO'd in the 2nd round. He comes out motivated, pissed off, ready to fight Kelvin Gastelum, maybe the smallest guy at the upper end of 185, and also the guy with the weakest ground game. So Chris Weidman puts him on his back and arm triangles him in round 3. Everyone's excited. The champ is back. Chris Weidman is on his way back up, and then he gets KO'd stiff by Jacare in round 3 in their fight. Chris Weidman is damaged goods, ladies and gentlemen. I love this guy. He's a nice guy. He's really good. He's an incredible fighter, but I just don't think he's got it at this point. I think this is a very, very similar spot to Luke Rockhold. Luke Rockhold crapped out at 185, and he tried to move up to 205 because he's such a big 185er. He thought he would get some reinvigoration in his career at that point. Weidman is 35 years old, and I just don't see it. If he was going to move up to 205, take an easier fight. He's fighting a 29-year-old power puncher who's maybe the worst matchup for him in the division. The UFC is loving this because they're going to make Dominick even more popular because of this. Now, Dominick's most recent 3 fights are Jared Cannonier, Ovince St. Preux, and Volkan Oezdemir, all 3 of who he pieced apart, and he dropped and KO'd Jared Cannonier stiff. Now, Jared Cannonier is the guy we talked about most recently against Jack Hermansson. He has only been KO'd twice, and one of those came by Dominick Reyes. It's the only one since 2015. So the only KO loss he's had in the UFC. And that guy is built out of solid metal. Like, Jared the Gorilla Cannonier is something else. He is not human. He's insanely durable, and Dominick Reyes shut the lights off. Now, Dominick completely pieced up OSP over 3 rounds. He had a real close fight with Volkan Oezdemir over 3 rounds. But if that shows you the kind of durability that this guy's got, he's able to stand toe-to-toe with no time. I mean, I'm all in on Dominick Reyes. I love this guy. He's one of my hottest prospects, especially for 205. I think he's going to cause Chris Weidman a lot of problems. If Chris can't get this thing to the ground, he's in serious trouble. Let's go back to the numbers. Dominick Reyes is 6'4" with a 77-inch reach, and he will actually have a reach disadvantage because somehow Chris Weidman is a monkey and has a 78-inch reach. Now, Dominick Reyes outputs 5.05 significant strikes per minute. He only absorbs 2.27, and he has an 85% takedown defense. So he has a massive strike differential. He outstrikes his opponents, and these are his UFC opponents, by a large margin. Chris Weidman, on the other hand, has a 3.15 significant strikes per minute rating with a 3.23 significant strikes absorbed rating. He gets hit more than he hits his opponents. And in this matchup, that is a bad thing. I believe that Jacare Souza wrote the book on how to beat Chris Weidman. Dominick Reyes likes to work the body, and that's exactly what Souza did. That opened up the headshots, and that led to Chris Weidman being KO'd stiff. Dominick Reyes is bigger and stronger and hits harder than Jacare Souza. He will work the same game plan, and I don't think Chris Weidman gets out of the 3rd round this time. I'm on Dominick Reyes. This is another one that I tweeted out earlier in the week, and I'm very, very happy that I did. I got Dominick Reyes at minus 147. He's now sitting around minus 160 and minus 170. So of the fights that I tweeted out, Darren Stewart, Gillian Robertson, Dominick Reyes, we beat 2 of those line moves, and Darren Stewart was the only one that we were wrong about. So if you follow me over on Twitter, you stand a good chance of getting better lines, because I tweet out lines that I think are going to move against me, and that's exactly what we did here. We beat 2 of those lines, and I love it. This is a really great card. This is an exciting and fun card, and the top end of this main card here has some serious implications and some serious fights. This is going to be a fun one to watch on Friday night. I'm very much looking forward to it, and we are short on picks. I usually have a decent chunk more than this, but there aren't a whole lot more spots that I'm really a big fan of. So I do apologize if you're used to me giving out 6, 7, 8 picks. We're keeping this one a little closer to the vest. I'm going to continue working, continue researching. You never know. I usually pop up with something that I like enough to make it a bet, so that might happen later on. Give me a follow at Twitter at DieHardMMAPod, and we will see what happens a little closer to fight time. Let's recap those picks. We got a short night this week. We've got Randy Costa versus Boston Salmon. We're going to take the under 2.5 at even money plus 100. We are on Darren, the Dentist Stewart, to knock some teeth out at minus 106. We're going to roll with our girl, Gillian Robertson, to get this thing done at plus 140. I hope you hit that line early. That's why I gave it to you. Dominick Reyes, the Devastator, will end Chris Weidman's hopes at 205. The man is at -147. We beat another line move. I love our 4 plays on this card. There might be more later on. Thank you all for following me. Thank you for the love. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Tell me down below the crazy moneyline parlay you hit because I was so damn right on all of last week's fights, and then PayPal me that tip because you made $500. I love you guys. I wouldn't be doing this show if it wasn't for you all, so like, share, subscribe, help me out. Good luck this weekend on all of your action. Fights are on Friday. Let's roll.